Hey y'all, this is Trina. I am a faculty member with Move to End Violence. I'm the founder of Parenting for Liberation, and I'm a movement maker with Move to End Violence, and I'm so excited to be joined with my fellow movement maker, Sarah Curtis. Sarah, do you want to tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Bonjour, my name is Sarah Curtis. I live in Cloquet, Minnesota, the northern part of Minnesota, the ancestral homeland of the Anishinaabe people. I'm also a movement maker with cohort 4, the last cohort that was up. Looking forward to cohort 5. And got to spend a lot of really good time with Trina and share some of the things that were important to me and that are important, I believe, to the whole movement.
Since a lot of folks are at home, we're sheltering in place and we're with our families, we're really thinking about how do we build an intergenerational movement. And so, what better way than to practice movement building in our own homes, with our families, with our children, with our elders, and that we build across generations so that this movement can be sustainable. So I'm really excited to talk to Sarah, someone who I saw, on social media had been cooking and baking and all kind of stuff, and just really wanted to talk to you about how are you integrating your family in that, and how do you see cooking as a liberatory practice. I'm curious to you, like, you've been cooking up a storm and how do you see food as healing and as medicine?
So I see food as healing and medicine. First of all, because I am someone with one of those food-based illnesses. I'm type 2 diabetic, and I have been for about 5 years. And so really watching my food and taking care of my food is something that's important to make me healthy, because I know that if I don't eat correctly or I cheat too much, it actually messes with my mental health and it messes with the way my physical body feels. Like I get all inflamed and I get all kinds of stuff. And so that doesn't feel great too. There's a ceremony in creating food for people that you love. Even now during COVID, which, parents, I feel you, 3 meals a day is a lot. As someone who works out of the home most of the time, it can be a lot, right? But knowing that, little spaces of joy, even if I'm making a peanut butter sandwich with carrots for my son, is that cutting the crust off, cutting it into 4 pieces, or cutting it out with like a cookie cutter or some kind of special shape, right? Helps me think about the smile he's going to have on his face. And it also lets him know that I put some thought and care into creating something that is special for him.
As we talk about food prep, like how do we acknowledge those who grow our food, who plant our food, who farm our food, who harvest our food. And so when I think about you actually going out and actually picking the berries, you said 7 hours of berry picking, right? That as you're doing that, it's not just like you're begrudgingly grabbing these berries and, oh my gosh, I got to do this, but you're doing this with intention. You were joyful, you were with your friend. And so I also want to acknowledge like the ceremony of that part, about before it even gets into your kitchen to start preparing. What is the way that we can honor the sacred and important role of the food harvesting?
For me, that harvesting and that nature is that principle of intentionality of if you're going to take something, to give something back. So specifically in my culture, it might be tobacco. One of our sacred medicines is putting something like that down. But if it's not your culture of, just a prayer or an acknowledgement or exchanging of energy, whatever that means for you to just say, I recognize that it took energy for things to grow and for things to be here, and that we're getting life and energy and joy and pleasure from what we're harvesting. I get so much pleasure out of blueberries, y'all. It is no joke. No joke.
I mean, you were willing to go up against a bear, so I'm assuming.
Yes, I will wrestle a black bear, which are not as dangerous as they sound. But if your accessibility is harvesting from the grocery store, which might be your accessibility, is also to have that really good intention, is to know that we don't always understand what conditions folks are in. And we know, and we do know, a lot of times those aren't great conditions. And they also might not be good conditions for the animals that were harvested, for the just so many different things. And so to even take that time as you're preparing food and, to say thankful, to say thank you, to be thankful, to think on it just for a minute, put that intentionality in. Whatever your spiritual practice is acknowledging, that, or acknowledging for the day, and remembering is that energy goes into that, right? Like I tell my son all the time, calories equal energy, right? Like that's what it is. Calories are energy. And so we eat to live.
That's so special and sacred. And I also think about Alan sharing that you cook food for a family and community, and it is medicine for them or healing for them because it fills them up with joy, or it brings joy inside of them.
Yes.
And so I just want to invite you to share a little bit more about how do you see the food that you're preparing during COVID as a way to actually stay connected in this moment of social isolation or physical distancing. How do you see and use food as a way to connect you to other people?
I found myself one day feeling, getting some emotions already, but feeling that I really miss my mom and that I love her very much. And it makes me feel helpless when I can't be next to her, especially in this time where there's a lot of fear. And especially in that time where our strongest power is our connection as a family. And so in that feeling of maybe being a little despondent or really sad, I bake I bake my emotions for that ceremony in that black and white. And then I got to thinking, boy, my parents would love some of this cake. And so that's when I started. I drove up to their house. They have a table on their back deck, and I started just leaving treats for them. And I started, going every time I cook something now, I cook double batches or triple batches, and I drop them off at different places. Because if I can't physically hug my mom right now, I can hug her mouth. I can hug her mouth with a baked good where she can feel all my love and all my prayers and all my intention, and that my family can know that I'm still here even though we can't touch each other, is that I can touch them in that kind of way. And as long as I remain not ill and my household remains not ill, that's going to be a practice that I'm going to continue.
That's so sweet. I wish I lived over there so I can get a delivery. But my family has figured out ways to do that. My job is to deliver all the healing medicines and herbs, right? So I'm like, oh, I have this tea, I have this tincture, I have this elderberry syrup. So that's what I'm delivering. I'm delivering medicines as well, but I also know that food is medicine. And they say, the pathway to someone's heart is through their stomach. So you're definitely, giving folks some love. I'm curious for you about how some of those recipes that you're creating and cooking are not only connecting you to your parents, your moms, but maybe connecting you to your ancestors or your elders, those recipes that have been passed down from generation to generation, and how they resemble our resilience.
One of the things, so this is my Scandinavian grandmother that passed away, and she made what's called St. Lucia Bread. And it's a cardamom orange yeast bread that she would cook. And I have such fond memories of getting these big braided loaves that had a glaze with jelly beans on top of it for every Easter. So what I did was I created from her recipe little tiny Lucia breads that had jelly beans and glaze and that memory, right? That I could bring forward to my family of this time. But as I was cooking the bread, the smell, right? Oh my goodness. When I smelled that bread, it was just like smelling my grandma, right? And I could just, as I'm baking it, I was just flooded with memories of the love I knew that she gave me and the love that I maybe didn't understand while she was alive. And I kept calling my partner into the kitchen saying, "Oh my gosh, smell this. It smells just like Grandma Sally. Smell this. It smells just like Grandma Sally." And eating and having those recipes help me connect to something that is stronger than me. So even though those folks aren't here anymore, um, they are in a different way.
Since this is about cooking up liberation, if you were to think about, when COVID-19 is on the decline and we can return to life, and I don't want to say return to the way things were, right? When we start anew, afresh, from pandemic and crisis and trauma, resilience in a new world can begin. Curious in that new, like, if you were cooking up that new world, right? If you were cooking up liberation, what would be the recipe? Like, what would be the ingredients?
To me, liberation is like a good yeast bread. Ooh. Right? It's a good yeast bread. Things have to be warm, right? And you have to let that yeast kind of bubble for a little while. You can't just like move quickly or skip steps. You have to nurture. So nurturing and patience and care would come in. And like a good, yeast bread, the slow, the rising in between. My hope for the liberation as it's coming is just like that bread, is that we don't rush into bam, 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 the energy signature that happened before. But I really hope after COVID is that recipe for liberation looks like that yeast bread, where we give ourselves patience and time and clarity and slow that pace down so that we can really love and appreciate the gathering of all of us and how amazingly resilient and, quite frankly, delicious as we are. So that's my recipe for liberation.
As a pathway for liberation, I love it. I love the ability for it to rise and rise again, and that we can put our own flavor and taste. And we have to slow down. I really heard that. Slow down. We can't go back to the hustle and bustle, and that this moment of us slowing down and being with family is teaching us how to practice that liberated world that you're talking about. Thank you so much for taking the time. Folks who listen, we will have a tool where you can create and lean into this conversation around what does it mean to cook up liberation? How is food healing? It's just going to be a space for you to reflect and also share what your liberated recipe is with us. So thank you so much.